Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he checked the scanner readings again. His small ship had been traveling through empty space for 3 months now, looking for new planets that humans might be able to live on someday. The work was lonely, but Jake liked it that way. He could think clearly out here among the stars. The beeping sound from his control panel made him look up. Something was wrong. His ship's computer was picking up a signal from somewhere nearby. Jake frowned and turned toward the main screen. The signal was weak, but it was definitely there. Computer? What kind of signal is that? Jake asked. Unknown type of distress call, Commander Morrison, the computer replied in its calm voice. The pattern suggests emergency status. Jake felt his heart beat faster. A distress call meant someone was in trouble. He had been alone in space for so long that he had almost forgotten other people existed. But someone out there needed help. Show me where it's coming from, Jake said. The main screen lit up with a star map. A red dot blinked about 2 hours. Away from his current position, Jake did not think twice about it. He changed course toward the signal right away. As his ship got closer, Jake could see something strange on his scanner. The object was not like any human ship he had ever seen. It was smooth and curved, almost like it was made of glass or crystal. Beautiful silver lines ran along its surface in patterns that seemed to move when he looked at them. Never seen anything like that before, Jake said to himself. The ship was clearly damaged. Large cracks ran through its hull, and Jake could see gas leaking out into space. Whatever had happened to it, the people inside were in serious danger. Jake tried to contact the ship using every communication method he knew. He sent signals on all the standard frequencies that humans used, but got no response. The ship just kept drifting through space, its lights getting dimmer. Computer, are there any life signs on that ship? Jake asked. Scanning now, the computer replied after a few seconds. It continued. I detect 1 weak life sign. The readings are unusual, but definitely indicate a living being. Jake made his decision quickly. He brought his ship close to the damaged vessel and put on his spacesuit. The person inside that ship was going to die if he did not act fast. Moving carefully through the airlock, Jake used his suit's small rocket pack to fly across the gap between the two ships. The damaged ship's hull was even more beautiful up close. The material seemed to glow with its own inner light. The silver patterns moved like liquid metal. Jake found an opening in the ship's side where the hull had cracked. He squeezed through carefully, trying not to make the damage worse. Inside, the ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls curved smoothly, and soft blue light came from everywhere at once. Strange symbols glowed on smooth panels, most of them flashing red dot following his scanner's readings. Jake found the source of the life sign in what looked like a small room near the center of the ship. When he saw her, Jake stopped breathing for a moment. She was clearly not human, but she was beautiful in a way that made his chest feel tight. Her skin was pale blue, like ice touched by moonlight. Her hair was silver and seemed to move by itself, flowing around her face like she was underwater. She was lying very still in what looked like a sleeping pod, her eyes closed. Jake could see that she was hurt. Dark blue blood stained her strange clothing, and her breathing was very shallow. The air in the ship was getting thinner by the minute. Hold on, Jake whispered, even though he knew she could not hear him. I'm going to get you out of here. Working as quickly as he could, Jake carefully lifted the alien woman from her pod. She was lighter than he expected, and her skin felt warm even through his gloves. He carried her back to the opening in the hull, and then across to his own ship. Jake's ship had a small medical bay with equipment designed to help injured humans. He had no idea if it would work on an alien, but he had to try. He laid her down on the medical table and started the ship's medical computer. Computer, scan this person and tell me what you find, Jake said. Beginning scan, the computer replied. Warning, subject is not human. Biological systems are similar, but not identical to human norms, attempting to adapt medical protocols. Jake watched the scanner move over the alien woman's body. Her breathing was getting weaker, and the blue color of her skin was starting to fade. He had to do something. What can I do to help her? Jake asked. Subject appears to be suffering from blood loss and oxygen deprivation, the computer said. Recommend immediate treatment to stabilize breathing and circulation. Jake had some medical training from his years in space, but he had never worked on an alien before. He started with the basics, using the ship's medical equipment to give her oxygen and stop the bleeding from her wounds. Her blood was dark blue instead of red, but it seemed to work the same way human blood did. For hours, Jake worked to save her life. He cleaned and bandaged her wounds, gave her fluids to replace what she had lost, and monitored her breathing. The computer helped by adjusting the medical equipment to work with her alien biology. Slowly, the blue color began to return to her skin. Her breathing became stronger and more regular. Jake felt relief wash over him as he realized she was going to live. He had saved her. Jake sat down in the chair next to the medical table, suddenly feeling very tired. He looked at the alien woman's face, peaceful now in sleep. She was no longer in danger, but Jake found himself wondering who she was and where she had come from. Her ship had been more advanced than anything humans had ever built. Her people must be very intelligent. As Jake watched, her eyes began to flutter open. They were large and violet, like the color of deep space just before dawn. When she saw him, she tried to sit up quickly, but Jake gently pushed her back down. "Easy," he said softly. "You're safe now. You were hurt, but you're going to be okay." She looked at him with those amazing violet eyes and said something in a language Jake had never heard before. Her voice was like music, with tones that seemed to rise and fall like a song. Jake could not understand the words, but he could hear the emotion in them. She sounded grateful. "I'm sorry I don't understand," Jake said, pointing to himself. "I'm Jake Morrison." She tried to repeat his name, but it came out sounding different in her musical voice. Then she pointed to herself and said something that sounded like Lyra. "Lyra," Jake repeated, and she smiled. It was the most beautiful smile Jake had ever seen. Her whole face lit up, and for a moment, he forgot that she was an alien from another world. She was just a person who had been in trouble. He had helped her. Jake had no way of knowing that in her culture, what he had just done meant they were now married. He had touched her, treated her wounds, and saved her life with his own hands. According to the laws of her people, she now belonged to him, and he to her, till death separated them. But for now, Jake was just happy that she was alive. He had found another living being in the vast emptiness of space, and he had been able to help her. That felt like the most important thing in the universe. 3 days had passed since Jake rescued Lyra from her damaged ship. She was healing well, and the ship's medical computer had learned enough about her biology to keep her healthy. But Jake was starting to notice something strange about her behavior. Lyra followed him everywhere. When he went to check the ship's engines, she came with him. When he ate his meals, she sat nearby and watched him carefully. When he slept, she found a spot on the floor next to his bed and stayed there all night. At first, Jake thought she was just scared. Being alone on a strange ship with an alien would frighten anyone. But there was something else in the way she looked at him. Her violet eyes seemed to study his every move, like she was trying to understand something important. Jake's ship was heading toward the nearest human space station, a place called Gateway Station. It would take 5 more days to get there. Jake sent a message ahead telling them about his discovery of the first alien they had ever met. The response came back quickly, filled with excitement and orders to be very careful. "Computer, can you understand more of what Lyra says now?" Jake asked. The ship's language system had been working day and night to figure out her speech patterns. "I am making progress, Commander Morrison," the computer replied. "Her language is very complex, with many sounds that humans cannot make, but I believe I can translate basic concepts." Jake found Lyra in the main room, looking out at the stars through the big window. She was wearing clothes that Jake had found for her, simple gray pants and a blue shirt. Her own clothes had been too damaged to save. She looked small and lost. "In the human-sized clothing?" "Lyra," Jake said gently. She turned to look at him immediately, as she always did. "Computer, tell her we're going to meet more humans soon. Friends of mine." The computer made a series of musical sounds, trying to copy the way Lyra spoke. She listened carefully, then responded with a long string of words that sounded worried. She says she understands, the computer translated. But she is concerned. About something, translation is unclear, but she seems to be asking about protocols or procedures. Jake sat down next to Lyra on the bench by the window. Tell her she doesn't need to worry. The humans we're going to meet are good people. They'll help her get home. When the computer translated this, Lyra's reaction was not what Jake expected. She looked shocked, then frightened. She spoke rapidly in her musical language, her voice rising with what sounded like panic. She says she cannot go home, the computer reported. Not without you. She keeps repeating a word that might mean bonded or connected. She seems very upset about the idea of separation. Jake felt confused. Why can't she go home? Ask her what's wrong. The conversation that followed was slow and difficult. The computer's translation was still rough, and Lyra had to repeat many things several times. But slowly, Jake began to understand that something serious had happened when he saved her life. She says that among her people, when someone saves another person's life through direct physical contact, it creates a special bond, the computer explained. The word she uses most often translates to something like life-touched or soul-bound. What does that mean exactly? Jake asked, though he was starting to get a bad feeling about this. Lyra spoke again, pointing to Jake and then to herself. Made gestures that looked like she was trying to show two things being tied together, based on her gestures and words. I believe she is saying that you and she are now connected by law in her culture, the computer said. The closest human equivalent would be marriage. Jake felt like someone had hit him in the stomach. Marriage? Are you sure that's what she's saying? The computer made more musical sounds to Lyra, asking for clarification. Her response was long and detailed, with many gestures toward Jake. Confirmed Commander Morrison. In her culture, when someone performs what she calls the ritual of life-saving, by touching the injured person and healing them with their own hands, it creates a permanent bond. She says you are now her life keeper, and she is your life gift. Jake stared at Lyra, who was looking back at him with those big violet eyes. She seemed to be waiting for some kind of response from him. Compute. Ask her what happens if I don't want to be married to her. When the computer translated this, Lyra's face went very pale, and her blue skin seemed to lose its glow. In a whisper, looking down at her hands, she says that refusing the bond would bring great shame to both of you, the computer reported. In her culture, it would mean that either you did not perform the life-saving properly, or that she is not worthy of the bond. She says her family would be dishonored, and she might be cast out from her people. Ass! Jake ran his hands through his hair, trying to think. This was not what he had expected when he decided to help someone in trouble. What about her family? Won't they want her back? Lyra spoke again, her voice getting stronger. She pointed to Jake several times and then to herself. She says her family will want to meet you, the computer translated. They will want to understand the bond and make sure it is proper. She says her father is an important person among her people. Great, Jake muttered. I accidentally married an alien princess. The computer made questioning sounds to Lyra, and she responded with what sounded like a correction. Not a princess, Commander Morrison. But her family does hold a high position in their government. Her father commands their space fleet. Jake felt the situation getting worse by the minute. He looked at Lyra, who was watching him with an expression that seemed both hopeful and terrified. She was beautiful. There was no doubt about that, but she was also completely alien. Didn't know anything about her people, their customs, or what being married to one of them would mean. Computer, how? Long until we reach Gateway Station? Jake asked. For days, 17 hours, the computer replied. Jake nodded. Send another message to the station. Tell them the situation is more complicated than we first thought. We're going to need diplomats, not just scientists. Over the next few hours, Jake tried to learn more about Lyra and her people. Translation was getting better, and he could have simple conversations with her. He learned that her people were called the Zephyrians, and they lived on several worlds in a distant part of the galaxy. They were peaceful, but had very strict traditions about family and social bonds. Lyra seemed surprised by many of Jake's questions about her culture. When he asked her about her own feelings about their bond, she looked confused. She says the bond is not about feelings, the computer translated. It is about honor and duty. She says feelings may come later, but the bond itself is more important than personal desires. This was very different from how humans thought about marriage. Jake tried to explain human customs to her, how people usually chose their own partners, based on love and attraction. Lyra listened carefully, but seemed to find the idea strange. She says that sounds dangerous, the computer reported. She asks how you can trust someone to stay with you if they chose you only for feelings that might change. Jake had never thought about it that way before. In her culture, marriage was about commitment first, and feelings were something that might develop over time. It was the opposite of what most humans believed. As they talked, Jake began to see that Lyra was intelligent and thoughtful. She asked good questions about human culture, and seems genuinely interested in understanding his people. She was also funny in a quiet way, making small jokes that the computer struggled to translate, but that made Jake smile. But the biggest surprise came when Jake asked her what she wanted to happen when they reached the human station. She says she wants to stay with you, the computer translated. She says the bond is not just a law, it is also a protection. She believes that you will keep her safe, as you did when you first found her. Jake realized that whatever happened next, his life was about to become much more complicated. He had saved one person's life and somehow gotten married to her in the process. Now he had to figure out how to handle first contact between humans and an advanced alien species, while also dealing with his own unexpected marriage as he looked out at the stars ahead. Jake wondered if Gateway Station was ready for what was coming their way. Gateway Station was buzzing with activity when Jake's ship arrived. Word about the first alien contact had spread quickly through human space. Scientists, diplomats, military officers, and reporters had all rushed to the station to be part of this historic moment. Commander Linda Brooks was waiting at the docking bay when Jake's ship connected to the station. She was the senior officer at Gateway Station and had been dealing with calls from Earth government officials all week. Everyone wanted to know about the alien and what this meant for humanity. Jake Morrison, Commander Brooks said, as Jake and Lyra walked off the ship together. You've certainly stirred up a lot of excitement. Jake looked around at all the people waiting to meet them. Scientists held scanning equipment, ready to study Lyra. Diplomats carried translation devices and official documents. Military personnel stood ready for any kind of trouble. Lyra moved closer to Jake when she saw all the staring faces. Commander Brooks, this is Lyra, Jake said. She's from a people called the Zephyrians, and we have a problem, Brooks raised. An eyebrow? What kind of problem? Jake took a deep breath. According to her culture, when I saved her life, I accidentally married her. The room went completely silent for a moment. Then everyone started talking at once. Scientists wanted to know about Zephyrian biology. Diplomats worried about legal implications. Military officers wondered if this was some kind of alien trick. Everyone quiet, Commander Brooks said firmly. The room settled down. Jake explained this slowly. Over the next hour, Jake told the whole story. Explained how he found Lyra's damaged ship, how he rescued her and treated her injuries, and how the computer had translated her explanation. Of their marriage bond, several experts asked questions trying to understand the alien culture. Dr. Susan Miller, the station's chief scientist, was fascinated by the biological aspects. So physical contact during a life-saving situation creates this bond? Is it some kind of chemical reaction? Lyra had been quiet during most of the discussion, but now she spoke up. The station's computer system was more powerful than Jake's ship computer, and translation was getting easier. The bond is not about biology, she said through the translator, her musical voice filling the room. It is about honor and responsibility. When someone risks themselves to save another, they prove they are worthy of trust. Ambassador Carol Davis, Earth's representative to the outer colonies, leaned forward. What exactly does this marriage bond mean in your culture? What are the obligations? Lyra explained that the Life Keeper and the Life Gift were bound together until death. They were expected to protect each other, make important decisions together, and their families became connected. Breaking the bond was considered one of the worst crimes in Zephyrian society. And what happens if Jake refuses this bond? Ambassador Davis asked. Lyra's blue skin grew paler. Then I am shamed before all my people. My family loses honor. I cannot return home. Dr. Richard Hayes, a cultural expert, studied his notes. This puts us in a very difficult position. We can't force Jake into an alien marriage, but we also can't be responsible for harming this woman's place in her society. Jake had been listening to all the discussions, but his attention kept returning to Lyra. She sat very straight in her chair, trying to look brave, but he could see she was scared. Every time someone talked about the possibility of breaking the bond, she looked like she might cry. There's something else, Jake said. She told me her father is important in their government. He commands their space fleet. This news made everyone very nervous. Ambassador Davis immediately started thinking about the political implications. If we insult the family of a high-ranking alien official, it could damage any chance of good relations with their species. How long before her people come looking for her? Commander Brooks asked. Jake checked his ship's communications log. I sent out a general distress call response when I found her. If her people received it, they'd probably know where she is. If summoned by his words, the station's alarm system began beeping. The communications officer looked up from his panel with wide eyes. Commander Brooks, we're receiving a transmission from an unknown fleet. They're requesting permission to approach the station. On the main screen, the most beautiful ships anyone had ever seen appeared. There were 5 of them, all made of the same crystal-like material as Lyra's damaged vessel. They moved through space like dancers, their hulls glowing with soft light. That's them, Lyra said quietly. That's my father's fleet. Ambassador Davis looked nervous. Open a communication channel. Let's see what they want. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at an alien who was clearly related to Lyra. He had the same blue skin and silver hair, but he was much larger and his expression was stern. When he spoke, his voice was deeper than Lyra's, but it had the same musical quality. I am Admiral Theron Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective, the translation system reported. I seek my daughter, Lyra Veltar, and the human who has become bonded to her. Lyra stood up quickly and spoke to her father in their own language. The conversation was rapid and emotional. Jake could not understand the words, but he could hear the worry in her father's voice and the explanations in hers. Admiral Veltar's eyes moved to Jake. You are the human who performed the life-binding ritual with my daughter. Jake nodded. I am. I didn't know about your customs when I helped her. I was just trying to save her life. Ignorance does not change the bond, Admiral Veltar said. My daughter is now yours by our law. The question is whether you will honor this bond or bring shame upon both our families. Ambassador Davis stepped forward. Admiral, we need to discuss this situation. Human culture is very different from yours. Our people don't arrange marriages this way. Your customs are not relevant, Admiral Veltar replied. My daughter was saved by this human according to our rituals. The bond exists whether your people recognize it or not. Jake could see that this was going nowhere good. The Admiral was getting angry, and Ambassador Davis was getting defensive. Lyra looked like she wanted to disappear. Wait, Jake said, stepping forward. Can I talk to Admiral Veltar directly? Everyone looked surprised, but Admiral Veltar nodded. Speak human. I want to understand your culture, Jake said. I want to know what this bond really means and what would be expected of me. I'm not rejecting it, but I need to understand it. This was clearly not what Admiral Veltar expected to hear. He studied Jake for a long moment. You wish to learn our ways? Yes, sir. If I'm going to be bonded to your daughter, I want to do it properly. I want to understand what that means for both of us. Lyra looked at Jake with surprise and something that might have been hope. Her father's stern expression softened slightly. This is unusual, Admiral, Veltar said. Most beings either accept the bond immediately or reject it completely. You wish to negotiate terms? I want to understand, Jake repeated. In human culture, We believe marriage should be based on mutual respect and understanding. Lyra and I are going to be bonded. I want us both to know what we're agreeing to." Admiral Veltar was quiet for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. "Very well, human Jake Morrison. I will come aboard your station. We'll discuss this bond and what it means. But know this, my daughter's honor is more important to me than peace between our peoples." As the communication ended, Jake realized he had just committed himself to something he didn't fully understand. But looking at Lyra's grateful expression, he felt like he had made the right choice. Whatever happened next, he was going to face. Honestly, the question was whether two very different cultures could find a way to bridge the gap between them. One marriage at a time. Admiral Theron Veltar was even more impressive in person than he had been on the communication screen. He was tall and broad, with silver hair that seemed to move like liquid metal around his shoulders. His blue skin had patterns of darker blue, lines that Jake had not seen on Lyra, marks that seemed to indicate his high rank. The meeting room on Gateway Station had been prepared carefully. Human diplomats sat on one side of a large table, while Admiral Veltar brought two of his own advisors.
Ow.
Lyra sat between the two groups, looking nervous but determined. "Before we begin," Admiral Veltar said, "I must understand something. Human Jake Morrison, do you accept that the life bond exists between you and my daughter?" Jake had spent hours thinking about this question. "I accept that by your laws and customs the bond exists. I want to understand what that means." "It means she belongs to you now," Admiral Veltar said simply. "You saved her life with your own hands. You are responsible for her well-being, and she is bound to serve your needs." Ambassador Davis shifted uncomfortably. "Admiral, in human culture, we don't believe people can belong to other people. Marriage is a partnership between equals." "Your culture is young," Admiral Veltar replied. "We have maintained order and stability for thousands of years with our customs. The life bond ensures that both parties have clear duties and expectations." Jake looked at Lyra, who had been quiet during this exchange. "What do you think about all this, Lyra? What do you want?" Both Admiral Veltar and Ambassador Davis looked surprised by the question. In their different ways, both cultures were used to making decisions for people, rather than asking them what they wanted. Lyra spoke carefully, choosing her words through the translator. "I want to honor the bond that was created when you saved me. But I also want to understand your people's ways. I have seen that humans think differently about many things." "What would happen in a traditional Zephyrian bonding?" Jake asked Admiral Veltar. "You would come to our world and learn our customs. Lyra would teach you our ways and serve your household. You would be given a position appropriate to your status as the mate of a noble family member. Your children would be raised as Zephyrians." Jake nodded slowly. "And what would happen if we did things the human way?" Admiral Veltar looked confused. "What is the human way?" "We'd get to know each other first," Jake explained. "We would spend time together, learn about each other's likes and dislikes, hopes and dreams. We would decide together how we want to live our lives. If we decided we were compatible, we might choose to have a ceremony to celebrate our partnership." "And if you decided you were not compatible?" Admiral Veltar asked. "Then we would separate, hopefully as friends," Jake said. Admiral Veltar's advisors whispered to him urgently in their musical language. He looked shocked. "You would break a life bond over personal preferences?" "We would never form a life bond without personal compatibility," Ambassador Davis said. "Humans believe that love and mutual respect are the foundation of marriage." The room was quiet for several minutes. Admiral Veltar seemed to be thinking very hard about something. Finally, he spoke. "This is very strange to us, but I have watched my daughter since she was brought to this station. She seems different than she was before. More alive somehow." Jake had noticed this too. Lyra had become more talkative and curious as the days passed. She asked questions about everything and seemed fascinated by human technology and customs. "Maybe," Jake said slowly, "we could try something that combines both our ways." "What do you mean, Admiral?" Veltar asked. "What if Lyra and I spend time learning about each other's cultures? She could teach me about Zephyrian customs, and I could show her human ways. We could figure out together how to make this bond work for both of us. Ambassador Davis leaned forward. You're talking about a cultural exchange program, exactly, Jake said. But more than that, you would be learning as partners, not as teacher and student or master and servant. Lyra spoke up for the first time. In a while, I would like this. I want to understand why Jake helped me without knowing about the bond. I want to learn about human kindness. Admiral Veltar looked at his daughter with surprise. You want to learn human customs? I want to understand the person I am bonded to, Lyra said firmly. In our traditions, the life gift is supposed to serve the life keeper. But Jake keeps asking me what I want and what I think. This is new to me, but I find it interesting. Jake smiled at her. I want to understand why your people think saving someone's life creates such a strong bond. There must be wisdom in your customs that I don't see yet. Admiral Veltar was quiet again, thinking. His advisors whispered to him, and Jake could see they were not happy with the direction of the conversation. There is something else to consider, Admiral Veltar finally said. Out of her Zephyrian families will be watching this situation. Change our customs too much. It could cause problems in our society. What if we don't change your customs? Jake suggested. What if we just add to them? I don't understand, Admiral Veltar said. Jake was thinking out loud now, trying to work out a solution that could satisfy everyone. The life bond still exists. Lyra and I are still connected by your laws. But instead of following the traditional path immediately, we take time to understand each other first. We make the bond stronger by choosing it, not just accepting it. Miller, who had been quiet during most of the discussion, suddenly spoke up. It's like building a bridge. You're not tearing down either culture's foundation. You're building something that connects them. Lyra's eyes lit up. Yes, we could be the bridge between our peoples. Admiral Veltar studied his daughter's face. Jake could see that he was torn between his traditional beliefs and his love for Lyra. And if this experiment fails, if you find you cannot live together, we will have learned something valuable about both our cultures, Jake said. And we will face that problem honestly when it comes. You would risk the bond for this experiment, Admiral Veltar asked. Jake looked directly at Lyra. Think the bond is stronger if it's chosen freely rather than just accepted out of duty. Lyra smiled at him, and Jake felt something warm in his chest. Maybe this crazy situation could actually work out. Admiral Veltar stood up and walked to the window that looked out at the stars. His advisors continued whispering urgently, but he ignored them. After several minutes, he turned back to the group. Very well, he said. We will try this human approach, but there will be conditions. What conditions? Ambassador Davis asked. First, the bond cannot be broken during this learning period. You're committed to making this work, not just trying it out? Jake nodded, agreed. Second, both of our peoples must be involved. This cannot be a secret experiment. If it works, it should be an example for others. That makes sense, Jake said. Third, if serious problems arise, we will meet again to decide what to do. I will not let my daughter be harmed by this experiment. Of course, Jake agreed. Admiral Veltar looked at Lyra. And you, my daughter? Do you agree to these terms? Lyra stood up and bowed formally to her father. I agree, Father. I believe this path will bring honor to our family and understanding between our peoples. Admiral Veltar smiled for the first time since arriving at the station, and let us begin this strange new chapter. But remember, both of you, the galaxy will be watching to see if love can truly bridge the gap between the stars. As the meeting ended, Jake realized that his life had just changed in ways he could never have imagined. But looking at Lyra's hopeful expression, he felt ready for whatever came next. 6 months had passed since the historic meeting on Gateway Station. Jake and Lyra's unusual marriage had become famous throughout both human and Zephyrian space. News reports followed their progress, and scientists from both species studied their relationship to understand how different cultures could work together. Jake and Lyra now lived on a specially designed ship that could travel between human and Zephyrian worlds. The ship had sections built for both species, with human-style rooms and Zephyrian crystal chambers. It had become a floating embassy, where young people from both cultures came to learn about each other. Jake was in the ship's engineering section, working on a new type of engine that combined human and Zephyrian technology. Lyra found him there, as she often did when she wanted to talk. She had learned to love watching him work with his hands, building and fixing things with a passion that reminded her of Zephyrian artists. The morning reports came in from Earth and Zephyros, Lyra said, sitting down next to Jake's workbench. 3 more couples have requested to try our bonding process. Jake looked up from the engine component he was building. Humans, Phorian couples. Yes, 2 humans who saved Zephyrians, and 1 Zephyrian who helped a human family during the transport. Accident near Vega Station? Jake smiled. When their experimental marriage had started, they were the only mixed couple in known space. Now there were 12 human Zephyrian pairs, all following the new bonding process that Jake and Lyra had developed. Together? How is your father handling all this change? Jake asked. Lyra laughed, a sound like silver bells that Jake had grown to love. He says he doesn't understand young people anymore. Good yesterday? He told the Zephyrian Council that our marriage has brought more cooperation between our species than 50 years of formal diplomacy. This was true. The cultural exchange program that had grown out of their relationship now included thousands of people. Young Zephyrians came to human worlds to study engineering and creative problem-solving. Humans traveled to Zephyrian planets to learn about their advanced mathematics and philosophical traditions. Jake had spent 3 months on Zephyros, Lyra's homeworld, learning about her people's customs. The Zephyrians were amazed by his curiosity about their culture. Most aliens who came to their world were interested only in their technology, but Jake wanted to understand their art, their music, their way of thinking about the universe. Lyra had spent equal time on Earth and the human colonies. She was fascinated by human creativity and their ability to find new solutions to old problems. She had become an expert on human literature and loved the stories humans told about exploring space and meeting new species. Jake, Lyra said quietly, do you ever regret what happened? Sometimes I think about how different your life would be if you had never found my ship. Jake stopped working and looked at her. Guess. This was a question she asked sometimes, usually when she was feeling uncertain about something. He had learned to recognize the signs when she needed reassurance. Do you want to know what I was doing before I found you? Jake asked. Lyra nodded. I was flying around empty space, mapping planets that no one would visit for decades. I was lonely, and I was starting to think that maybe I wasn't meant to be around other people. I thought maybe I was better off by myself. Jake reached over and took Lyra's hand. Her skin was always slightly cool to the touch, but it had become the most comforting feeling in the world to him. Finding you didn't just change my life, Jake continued. It gave me a purpose I never knew I wanted. We're not just married, Lyra. We're building something new together. We're showing 2 different species that they can understand each other. Lyra squeezed his hand. I feel the same way. Before the accident, I was just following the path my family had chosen for me. I would have married whoever they selected and lived the life they planned. But with you, I get to choose every day how we live and what we do together. This was the heart of what made their relationship work. In traditional Zephyrian culture, marriage was about duty and following established roles. In human culture, marriage was about love and personal choice. Jake and Lyra had found a way to combine both ideas, creating a bond based on both commitment and daily decisions to care for each other. There's something I want to show you, Jake, standing up and leading Lyra to the ship's main window. Outside, they could see a fleet of ships from both species traveling together toward a new star system that had been discovered recently. Human exploration vessels flew alongside Zephyrian crystal ships, their crews working together to study the unknown region of space. 6 months ago, our people barely knew each other existed, Jake said. Now look at them. Lyra watched them mixed, fleet with pride. My father says this is the most important change in Zephyrian society in centuries. Our young people are learning that there are other ways to think about the universe. Human kids are learning that there's wisdom in traditions. And long-term thinking, Jake added. They stood together, watching the ships travel toward the unknown. Jake thought about how much had changed since that day when he first heard Lyra's distress signal. He had been looking for empty planets, but instead he had found a partner who shared his curiosity about the universe. Jake, Lyra said. I've been thinking about something. What's that? In 6 more months, we'll have been bonded for a full year. According to both human and Zephyrian customs, that's when couples usually decide if they want to make their bond permanent. Jake felt his heart beat faster. They had been so focused on their work and their role as cultural ambassadors that they hadn't talked much about their personal future. What do you think about that? Lyra turned to face him, her violet eyes serious. I think that what we have is already permanent. Not because our laws say so, but because we choose it to be. Jake smiled and pulled her closer. Are you asking me to marry you again? I'm asking if you want to have a real wedding this time, Lyra said. One where we both know what we're choosing, and we invite both our families to celebrate with us. Jake thought about the irony of it. They were already married by Zephyrian law, and their relationship had been studied and reported on throughout the galaxy. But they had never had a moment to simply choose each other without the pressure of diplomatic consequences. I would love that, Jake said, but I have one condition. What condition? Oh, we write our own vows. Not human traditional ones or Zephyrian ones. Words that say what this really means to us. Lyra's face lit up with joy. Yes, and we have the ceremony here, on our ship, with the stars as our witness. As they planned their real wedding, Jake realized that their story had become something bigger than just 2 people from different worlds learning to live together. They had become proof that understanding and love could bridge any gap, no matter how wide it seemed. The galaxy was full of different species, different cultures, and different ways of thinking about life. But Jake and Lyra had shown that with patience, curiosity, and genuine care for each other. Any 2 beings could build something beautiful together. When Admiral Veltar arrived for the wedding ceremony 3 months later, he brought a gift that surprised everyone. It was a new title for Jake in the Zephyrian language, one that had never existed before. It meant bridge builder. It came with the authority to help other interspecies couples who wanted to follow their example. As Jake and Lyra exchanged their self-written vows under the light of 1,000 stars, they knew they were not just promising to love each other. They were promising to keep building bridges between worlds, one relationship at a time. The universe, it turned out, was not so vast that love couldn't cross it.